Hey, have you heard anything? Can you hear anything to it? Mic check, 1, 2, test, 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 test. Microphone, check, 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 check. Mic check, 1, 2, mic check, 1, 2, test, 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 test. All right, cool.
Are we doing this in question? Am I making a state? How do you want to?
Why don't you give at the top you give just a sort of quick update about what we think the outcomes were for today, and then we can throw in questions, and then
Okay.
Lauren and Chris can be here to answer additional HR or operations questions that you might have.
Yeah. Okay. Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you for being here to talk about what's been happening with our transportation department, specifically with our bus drivers in the last couple of weeks. And so we had a meeting with them today at 11, and that was with members of what we call our bus driver advisory. This is a group of drivers that meets with our Senior Executive Director of Transportation, Tisha Davidson. And so they're a group that has been involved, and also some of the drivers that are not part of that, but that have been part of the I guess the walkout that has been happening for today was the third day of that. And so we met at 11 o'clock. We were able to rehash the plans and talk about the plans that we sent out to them last Friday. We allowed them again to talk in a smaller setting. It was probably about 20 of our drivers, along with Chris and Lauren, myself. Our school board chair was in the room, and a few other staff members, but just to talk through again, what do you think about the proposals that we have, the proposal that we've given you of action steps for the future? What are your thoughts about these things? They were able to speak. We were probably together an hour and a half where they spoke, again, kind of reiterating some of their concerns. Some of it was restating what they had talked about in that Thursday night meeting. And so the meeting ended with us, you know, basically in an agreement to the actions that we have outlined, and giving us a chance to now execute on those actions, as well as providing them a way to get their concerns immediately addressed. When our drivers have immediate concerns, a big part of the issue is that if it doesn't get addressed, you know, by someone that they go to, then it just festers. And pretty soon you've got one concern, another concern, and it creates this feeling of we must not be valued, someone is not listening to us, and we don't want any employee group in our district to ever feel that way. And so one of the solutions we've given them today is how do they go about getting their concerns addressed immediately. And the analogy I gave them is, you know, we really do have to fight little battles in this case. We have to address the little things so they don't become bigger things, and we don't have what happened here happen again. So we left the meeting in a positive state, and with drivers agreeing that they, in that meeting, now not every driver was in that meeting, obviously, but the ones that were in that meeting, everyone, many of them already have been working and had not stopped working, but some of the ones in the meeting that had will be back at work tomorrow. So we are looking forward to a new day and allowing us a chance to actually implement the plans that we have outlined with them. And today just gave us even more information that we needed to make sure that the actions we're designing are the right ones. So I will open up to any questions.
Drivers want more money, more respect. Those are just some of the things. What are some of the ways that you guys are going to kind of meet the needs that they have brought up?
Yep. So basically with the more money, one of the things that we are doing with them, and this was outlined in the letter, but we were able to explain it in more detail today. When we have 2 meetings next week with them, we are giving each driver an outline document personally of what their pay is per hour, what local longevity that was added last school year means in their pay, and what, because our board passed a market study rate that would take our drivers and all of our classified employees above the average of 5 specific entities, 2 districts of which are some of the highest paid districts. And so basically this individualized memo is going to outline for them all that has been done. I think when you look at a driver's salary, and I want everyone to know very clearly, by showing someone here is what it was 4 years ago, here is what it is today, making sure you understand your pay, it's still never enough, but it has been, we have drastically increased. In some instances, a driver in 4 years may have increased their pay by 25%. They don't realize that. But I think the bigger issue with our drivers is with their pay was that this year it has been done differently. And that was because of the early start calendar. We started prepaying them so that they wouldn't have to wait too long to get paid in the first paycheck. There was an unintended consequence of that in the next paychecks getting prepaid, it makes it very difficult to see what exactly you're getting paid. So there was an unintended consequence that came with that. And so we're going back starting in February to paying them how they were paid before, to where it's you work these hours and then you get paid for them. So we're going to fix that during the month of February. In addition to fixing their pay stub clearly outlined, here's the hours worked, here's what you make per hour. I mean, it was very clear for them before. I'm not really sure why that changed in the process, but it did. And so the pay stub going back to where they can really read it and be very clear about what they're making. And then their timesheet, the time, we started with a new time tracker this year, and that's also been a little bit confusing. And so all of those things are being fixed. And so, so that's about like making sure they're informed about their pay. And that was a huge issue, and that they can read the pay stub easily, that they know what they're making. And again, we talked to them about they are getting another raise. Our not local longevity, I'm sorry, that was last year's raise. And that will happen, for those that don't remember that, for every 3 years worked, someone got a 1% raise. So if you were in the system for 21 years, you would have gotten 1% every 3 years, which would be a 7% raise, and that would be on top of any state raise. And so it just every 3 years you're getting a bump up, and that's in addition to any other raises. And so a lot of this is just being clearly explaining it. And then we also, with the new market rate that was approved, that will be built into next year's budget. And so them understanding what that means for their paycheck for next school year is also very important.
Because I can't speak for them exactly, but just from what I've heard, I think you're saying for what they go through, sometimes they're not paid enough.
Yeah.
So how are we going to go about the respect or the behavior
Yeah.
of buses?
Right. No, and those are very good questions. And so basically, working conditions are, I'm not going to say they're equally as important to what people make. It's the working conditions, and that's for every employee group. This is not just the bus drivers. This is every group of employees has to feel that they are respected, and they have to feel that they are in conditions that show that they are valued. And so part of the plan, we talked a lot, probably about the first 45 minutes of the meeting today, was again rehashing discipline and concerns around student behavior, sometimes parent response to drivers, sometimes school staff response to drivers. It was varied, and we listened to very specific situations. And so we outlined the plan, and we will be rolling that out with them next week. It is a plan that will launch to students and families in January, but will be shared with bus drivers and principals next week around discipline and what that's going to look like on the bus with very specific protocols. And so again, and this is coming from at the systems level with those system-wide protocols. And it'll benefit not only the drivers, it'll benefit the school teams that are also responding to driver concerns about discipline on the bus. For those drivers that feel they're running routes that are difficult to run, and if they would like a person to support them, we're gathering data to find out how many drivers feel that way about their runs, so we can determine next steps with having someone ride buses with our drivers. So that will help when a driver feels that, my entire bus I'm having issues with. Another person on that bus to be able to do the proximity, to be able to help with discipline is going to be very helpful. For drivers that just have a child that misbehaves or two that misbehave, they need to know that when they come back to the school and they submit that referral, we need to make sure we're closing the loop with them. So there's protocols across the board that will create that consistency. And that's what it's about. Consistency, not being left up to individual schools, but a system level consistency for how we are dealing with discipline referrals. And again, we're going to continue with training for everyone. Behavior is a continuous, you have to have a lot of training to work with some of the behaviors that our adults in our school district are faced with every day. And that's just part of, post-pandemic, we've seen an uptick. We've seen an uptick in so many things: mental health concerns, behavioral health concerns, social emotional concerns. And so we have to chip away at helping people with behavior as well. Yes?
And I know that student behaviors, misbehavior is expected on buses, but I think for some people there might be a little taken aback that you've actually had issues with parents or adults. Can you talk a little bit about, is that just kind of a sporadic here and there sort of thing, or are you seeing it on some routes
Yeah.
becoming kind of a pattern?
Yeah. I have personally, talking to the group today and hearing individual, I haven't heard a system-wide level of some type of pattern with this at all. But one thing we found out today is that that may not always rise to the level of me or of even knowing that a parent has done that. And so one of the things that we, in our conversations with them today is that, what is the process now when that has happened? What has happened? Parents, nobody is allowed on a bus, maybe law enforcement, an employee, but a parent is not allowed to get onto a school bus unless they have a prearranged agreement that they have to, buckle in their child. That might be a younger student or a student with disabilities. But other than that, no parent should be on a bus, and it's actually against the law to be on a bus. And so to find out that there have been, I've only heard about a couple of instances, but it sounds like it is more widespread when you talk to the drivers. So I think us finding out, being able to escalate that above just the supervisor of the driver, but getting that to where Ms. Davidson can actually monitor that data and make sure that we're aware of it as a system. But I do think that what we're sending out to parents in January is going to be very clear about our expectations around respect toward our bus drivers. And that's respect toward everyone. Every employee should have a level of respect, and we should also maintain a level of respect with our parents as well. So again, all of this is about respect as a whole. We need to respect our children, we need to respect our parents, and they need to respect us. And so it is a two-way street here, but we're gonna do a better job of monitoring that, so I know exactly how many times it's happened, because again, I've only been made aware of a couple.
What changed between, Monday and Tuesday, when the first few days of the walkout, and today? Was it that meeting that you had with them, or was it the different things that you addressed today?
That is a very good question, because again, Thursday's meeting was a meeting that was planned by the drivers. And I told them this morning, I just kind of crashed their party, because it wasn't a meeting that they said, hey, superintendent, would you come to it? We want to share some concerns with you. It was bus drivers saying, we want to come together because we have concerns. And so a few of us just showed up to them. And so I think that night, when I got up at the end, and I didn't want to invade like their conversation, let them have it. But at the end, they were kind of all looking at me. So I stood up and spoke off the cuff. And the next day, we shared a list of things that we wanted to do more specifically. One of the things we found out in that meeting is that many times, so communicating with bus drivers is not as easy as it is communicating with employees that are housed under a school roof. You can use the principal to get messages to a custodian or to a TA or to a child nutrition worker, whereas getting messages out to bus drivers is more difficult, and especially when they were very honest and said, we don't really read emails very much, and we don't really, and one of our methods is sending out mass emails. We don't really listen to the robocalls very much. That's one of our other, and then we also use the tactic of putting something on their seat because we know they're gonna show up on their bus that next day. But then, if you put a two-page memo on a seat, you've gotta hope that that's gonna be read. And so I think one of the things that we said today that was very clear is that we need to have better lines of communications, and that means this. Every month, and this was in the letter, but we are very serious about it, and I think they realize that as well after today, that every month Ms. Davidson is going to meet with drivers collectively, that's what they want, in a sit-down where it's just her and them, where they can bring these concerns alive to her regularly each month. I think holding in concerns and not escalating them to someone that can address them can be it can be overwhelming. And I think what happens with employees is you feel like you're not being heard, you feel like you're not being respected, all this stuff is bubbling up, one thing happens, the next thing happens, and all of a sudden, we gotta come together and do something about this. I'm really glad that it escalated up the chain, and so that we can take a systems approach, because this is not, the issues about pay, this is not a department issue. It was not a transportation issue about the pay, it was a systems level issue. Systems level issues need a systems level response. So I think today we were able to allow them to restate the issues, but we were very clear with our next steps and asking them, please allow us to execute on these next steps. I am completely committed, because I will say, I've been here for 4 years, and my biggest The biggest thing, the most important thing for me as a superintendent is that every single employee in our school district feels valued. And I told them today that is not lip service. It's how I live every day. It's how I wake up. It's how we've been trying to address classified pay because they're our least paid employees. And so that has been the focus the last 4 years. And I try to just have a sincere conversation with them and tell them that do not wait anymore. Do not wait. One thing happens, you feel like you've taken it to who you need to take to, and it doesn't get fixed. Go to the next place, and Miss Davidson is going to be that place. And unfortunately, we're going to need to do that a lot in the beginning, as we also work with our supervisors and our entire department to make sure that we are all leading from a place of listening and of problem solving and of making sure that our employees feel valued. That has to be the expectation for all leaders. And so I think today was just, we think you're being heard. My last question then was, let me just go through everything again. Is there anything that we have not addressed within our approach to change? And they felt at the end of that nope. And I said, so tomorrow, basically, all of this has been an eye-opening for what we need to do as a system, but at the end of the day, the unintended consequence, and I've used that word 3 times, and I know that, but it's hurting kids because we need to make sure kids get to school, and all of them want the same thing. None of the drivers that have called in wanted to do any harm to children, and I think that we all knew that today. We all agreed to that, and so in the room, the consensus was in the room, we will be back at work tomorrow morning. Yes.
I know you're saying this new market rate is going to be built into the new school year, but how are you addressing that concern that like, oh, we need immediate pay increase now, if that's not going to start until the next fiscal year or next school year?
Yeah, so I think that honestly, it's number one is knowing exactly what that is even going to mean for them. And also some of them are getting another bump in their longevity this year. So it really is about them understanding where they are, where they started, where they are now, and where they're going next school year. It is a process of increasing pay. And again, bus drivers have been a group that we've actually probably addressed the most with, from extra money to run additional routes when we got back from the pandemic, to attendance bonuses, so we've got many classified employee groups that we're trying to address at once. And next Tuesday, I'll be bringing one last proposal to the board around all of our employees. That is a one-time, I'm not going to get into detail of that because I need to bring it to the board next Tuesday. And so if we're able to do something before the holidays, we will. But again, for an actual raise, hourly raise, that's going to happen in the fall unless we are able to uncover other dollars now. But I think them understanding what that means for their check is very important because it's a year-by-year raise. Last year, when the state gave a 6% raise to drivers, we bumped it up to 8%, and we did local longevity. But it's someone actually understanding that and what that means for their pay. And so part of this is just making sure they know that, and they see that we are committed to increasing their pay as much as we can every year. This is a process, and I think it will also help over time as the state might relook at, can we compensate our employees better in our education systems? Like if they start to say, okay, we need to send more money to make sure that our drivers are compensated and that all employees are compensated, like any time that we have an opportunity to increase pay, we will. And I think part of it is them knowing that. And we also work with a classified advisory council that represents all of our classified groups, and we're at the table with them quarterly. They have a board, and we meet with them. And every issue that comes up, we address together with them. And so we need to make sure that whoever is representing bus drivers on that advisory, that message also gets back and forth to our drivers.
One more question for the superintendent, she has to run for other meetings, and Chris and Laura will answer any other questions you have. So,
Okay, so I know you also mentioned the fact that these are some actual changes that you're going to be putting into place, but how is that going to be monitored in the future, starting in January, starting in February, to ensure that
Yep.
this walkout isn't happening?
Yeah.
and don't lose drivers?
Right, that was part of the discussion today, was actually monitoring and having checkpoints. And so those monthly checkpoints are in-person meetings that the drivers have requested to be able to actually hold us accountable to that. And that's what we talked about today. So there will be a process each of those monthly meetings for an accountability check on the plans. Where are we with the plans? How are they feeling as a result of those plans? And what feedback do they have for us as we keep moving forward? And so, I mean, there's no better pulse check than actually meeting with people to see the impact of what you put in place. What is that impact having on them? And so I think those monthly pulse checks with the drivers will tell us, yep, you're hitting the mark, this is helping, nope, we're still having these issues. And we're hoping, and what I did say today is, when you're talking about large-scale change with people involved, it's gonna be a process for sure. So I said it may not be in 3 days you see, oh my gosh, there's a huge difference, but in 2 weeks, in 3 weeks, in 4 weeks, you should really start to feel the change being, taking shape.
We'll let Ms. McManus go, and I had just asked you guys online for him to give a brief explanation, because some folks thought that this was like a union negotiation today, where we're doing a deal, and like, I just want to make sure you understand kind of that, how that works, that we don't have an employee union, so maybe we can ask.
Do you want to talk about that? Do you want to talk about that? Is there any final question? I have a 5 o'clock, I mean, it's in this building, thank goodness, but is there any other question for me before I jump out? That could take me 30 seconds.
Anything you would say to parents who, have had to live with this?
Yes. Yes, I definitely want to apologize to our parents. I know that working parents rely on our school bus transportation, and I am sorry to them that this has been added any kind of burden to their plate. And so, we are, again, us fixing or addressing adult issues should not have an impact on our children. So I apologize for that. That was not the intention of our drivers. And again, I believe honestly together we can make all these changes, and we're moving in the right direction. And so again, thank you to our families for their patience. Any other?
And Lauren, I wouldn't mind if you told them about how to watch in the morning for
I'm sorry?
updates as we see the conditions in the morning for absences.
So I believe I was asked to speak about, what's the, is it a collective bargaining agreement? In North Carolina, it's a right to work state, so there's no collective bargaining agreement. It's just a matter of working with employee groups to hear their issues and concerns, and we can solve them to get them to come back to work. Our goal is, we always want to keep absences to the minimal, and they had some concerns, and some of them were, they were valid. So it was our job just to listen and to see if we can, make sure they feel valued and heard, so they return to work and continue to serve our children. So there's no necessarily negotiated deal or anything as such. It's just a matter of listening and hearing our employees. Did that answer?
So in closing, we will continue to monitor all of our corridors and communicate with our drivers. And if we do have any absences that continue tomorrow, we will continue to push messages out through our EduLog app so that parents know the specific runs that are impacted. Those communications will also go to our schools so that schools can push messages out through Remind and their other communications as well. Are there any follow-up questions?
Yeah, is there anything on the timeliness of those kind of responses or requests that parents should know about? Because that was something that I think a lot of frustration was seen, like, oh, I didn't know until like an hour too late to be able to keep my kids in school.
So some of our drivers are reporting their absences early, but buses start rolling at 5:15 in the morning. And so sometimes those call outs come in between 4:30 and 5:15, even 5:30, 5:45. And so we are making those adjustments in as real time as possible. We have an excellent team that's picking up as many runs as they can. We have corridor teams that are also hopping on buses that have CDLs to run as many vacant runs as possible. And so it really is as they call in. And so in the morning, we hope to get those messages out by 5:30. And for the afternoons, we're trying to get them out by 1 p.m. because our middle schools dismiss at 2 and 2:05.
How many drivers were out today for the afternoon count as well?
We had 48 runs today that we were not able to cover.
So that's 48 drivers?
It is not.
Do you have a number for drivers?
I do not at this time. So starting is $16.69 and the highest is $27.31. I'm looking to my right at my HR guy. And the average for our drivers is around $17.50 to $18.
And I know that the ones that were in the room, it seems that they would be coming back to work tomorrow. Do you know if any others will be calling out, or is it just we'll wait and see what happens tomorrow?
No, we are definitely not sitting back and waiting. You know, our ask of the advocacy group was to share the meeting today and talk about the decisions and the next steps in our communications and encourage their fellow drivers to also come back to work. Our corridor teams are also reaching out to drivers, having the same communications, and working to get everyone back that we possibly can. All right. Thank you.
Thank you.